Go ahead and be seated. I'd like to welcome everyone here this afternoon. I'd like to thank Amy and Pam for asking me to conduct these services for Jim. It's an honor to do this. Thank you. The family would like to thank all of you for being here, and thank those who have provided food, flowers, visits, and cards. We thank all of you for that. The services today will begin with the musical number, Broken Halos by Chris Stapleton, performed by Deb and Lanny Main's family. After the musical number, we will have Jim's life history by Justin Luck. Then we will hear from an old friend, Paul Reed, who will give memories of University of Wyoming days, and we'll go that far. Thank you.
My share of broken halos, folded wings that used to fly. They've all gone wherever they go. Broken halos that used to shine. Angels come down from the heavens just to help us on our way. They come to teach us, then they leave us, and they find some other soul to save. I've seen my share of broken halos, folded wings that used to fly. They've all gone wherever they go. Broken halos that used to shine. Broken halos that used to shine. Don't go looking for the reasons. Don't go asking Jesus why. We're not meant to know the answers. They belong to the by and by. They belong to the by and
afternoon. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Justin Lucht. I'm married to one of Pam and Jim's nieces. And for the next 15 minutes or so, I get to proudly wear the label as Pam's favorite nephew. Being labeled in this world isn't necessarily a bad thing. As we all know, Jim put labels on a lot of us. Standing up here, I can notice a lot of you that might have been labeled one of Jim's little bitches. And of course, he said it softly with that innocent little smirk. He could always get away with it. When Macy was little, Jim would tell her, "Say some bitch, Mace." And Pam would respond, "No, bad Jim." Macy called her uncle Bad Jim for many years. This winter we were visiting, and our daughter Brooklyn, who was 10 months old at the time, she was playing with Jim, and Macy got her to say bad Jim. And though I know Brooklyn won't remember him, there's so many great stories and funny things that Jim did that we'll be able to tell her about. He'll never be forgotten, and he'll never be replaced. If we were to stick a label on Jim, it might sound something like humble, kind, generous, forgiving, unconditionally loving, dedicated, the brains of the operation, one of a kind, and a teaser. To wrap those up, we could just say that Jim was a great man. His childhood molded him to be the man that we've loved for the last 68 years. That's my daughter. Jim was born and raised on a farm on the north end of Powell to his father Joe and his mother Mary. One of 6 kids, Jim started working the farm at an early age and learned a work ethic that would never leave him, even in his final days. Jim was a small kid and a little top-heavy. Joe bought Jim a set of weights when he was 7 years old so he could be strong enough to defend himself. This early development of his confidence never faded. All of Jim's siblings agreed. Jim was the best brother you could ask for. Those memories from stacking bales on the hay wagon to the never-ending sheep chores to growing up and turning into best friends. Pam and Jim met in the 5th grade. While they didn't start dating until midway through high school, if I got that right, their early friendship was the foundation to an everlasting love and commitment. Ever since the beginning, it's been Pam and Jim, Jim and Pam, along with their mutual friend group. Tom said it best when he said, "With Jim, when you were in, you were in. He'd never give up on you." He was a man of his word, and he led by example. Jim truly lived his life by the golden rule. He'd take care of everyone around him, and when the time came, he was paid back tenfold for his good work. Jim never passed up the opportunity to have a little fun. Pam can remember Mike Meeker and Jim selling kegger tickets in the hallway at high school. They threw some doozies. Jim was the kind of guy that people flocked to. Amy said that even when she was in college, Pam and Jim would come down to Laramie for the weekend, and her parties would be 2 or 3 times the size as when she'd have them by herself. Jim started a pretzel fight one of those times with one of those industrial-sized bags from Costco. With plenty of ammo, Jim ultimately won the fight, and Amy picked up pretzels out of every nook and cranny for the next 6 months. A natural athlete, Jim loved to play all sports, especially wrestling and football. He was successful through his high school and University of Wyoming wrestling career, though Pam did admit that Jim was kind of a sore loser. And after taking 3rd at state one year, he stopped in Casper and threw his bronze medal into the river. Nothing but the best was good enough for Jim. He went on to win 2 Western Athletic Conference championships at UW, where he also obtained his degree in industrial arts. Jim was a humble and gentle man. You'd never know that. He could twist you into a knot and make you say mercy before you had time to blink. Even though he could, he wouldn't. Pam told me a story about a time shortly after they were married. At the bar, a guy came up to Jim and was making fun of his 10-gallon hat. Jim brushed it off with grace, but it was making Pam's blood boil. Pam warned him to quit. Finally, she had had enough. She said, "You bleep, bleep, bleep. You quit, bleep, 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 or I'm gonna kick your bleep, 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 bleep." He poked one more joke, and Pam grabbed him by the shirt collar, threw him on the ground, and she started beating on his face like it was the mudroom rug. She looked up to see Jim sitting in that same bar stool where he was, with that cheesy little smirk on his face. I can only imagine how proud he was to have selected such an alpha female as his lifetime mate. Rewind a couple of years. Pam and Jim were walking downtown Laramie. As they passed the jeweler, Jim pulled Pam in the door. I can picture Pam's eyebrows raised, saying, "What are we doing here?" Jim said, "Pick one." So she did. And it's a good thing he was buff and charming, huh, Pam? In 1974, Jim married his high school sweetheart. A natural fit into the family, everybody loved Jim. Chicks adored him. Pam said that Doc would call Jim almost daily to help him with a task, tell him a story, or invite him over for a whiskey. Doc and Dave taught Jim the ropes at hunting camp, though Pam refused to tell me any of those stories for fear that I would tell them all. And rightfully so. After moving back to Powell, Jim took over the family farm for a while and then worked construction before he landed an entry-level job at Conoco. Dedication and natural leadership earned him a successful career in the oil and gas industry. Jim and Pam had 2 daughters, Amy and Casey. Soon after, he began constructing the first of 2 homes that they built by hand. He and Pam worked side by side on these homes, as they did on countless other projects. Jim's hard work at home and in the workplace afforded him the ability to spend time in the mountains and at the lake, enjoying time with his family. Friends and family were always welcome on these trips, as well as in their home. I couldn't help but laugh at the boating stories. Being a boating enthusiast myself, I could relate. They all go something like, that time the bilge pump quit working, or the time we forgot to put the plug in, or the time we ran out of gas a few miles up the canyon. But man, we had fun. And while the girls panicked at first, they'd quickly find comfort in Jim's quiet rumination of a solution. He'd figure it out. During the construction of the new cabin at the Moss Ranch, everybody could count on Jim to be the brains of the operation. From floor plans to the final coat of stain, Jim's handiwork is engraved throughout. When Jim was first getting sick and went down to Arizona for treatment, Tyrell had to winterize the cabin by himself for the first time. I can remember Ty saying that he scratched his head a little and wished he had paid a little bit more attention when Jim did it. Jim put his heart into everything he did. When it was getting late on the mountain, Jim would get up, prep coffee for the morning, and sneak off to bed. In the morning after breakfast, he'd stand at the sink voluntarily and do the dishes or whatever task needed to be done. Jim brought a lot of love into the kitchen. More than anything else, Jim lived for his family, his wife, his daughters, and grandchildren. His daughters enjoyed his support, humor, and guidance from childhood through their own parenting years. Casey said, "I could always count on Jim. He loved unconditionally, and he'd never give up on anyone." Jim's family stretched much farther than blood, and those people were number one to him. Pam would go on an annual girls' shopping trip for the weekend, and Jim would stock the vehicle with snacks and drinks and make sure everything was ready for them before they left. Sometimes it was the little things that made the biggest difference. Casey said that after she graduated from cosmetology school, Jim drove over the mountains so he could be her first licensed haircut. He tipped her $100, but the time he gave her was worth far more than the money ever would be. Jim was witty. He had a nickname or two for almost everybody. And he was creative in his delivery of an inside joke, too. Casey said one year Jim got her and Pam 100 lighters for Christmas. Not necessarily that he wanted to encourage such a habit, but I'm sure he was tired of them losing theirs. Kaya and Kinley would always say to Jim, "Now, this is the last straw, Grandpa." And so one year, he sent them a box of straws so they wouldn't run out. Kysar wore the nickname Spidey, and Jim would send him a text from afar saying that there was a pungent odor in the air and was wondering if Kysar had showered that day. Chance, or where you prefer that I call you Fred. Jim would always call him Fred. He'd run with that show. Amy and Casey would get dog biscuits in their lunches when they traveled to high school sports. Beck told me that when her daughter Jamie was managing the UW wrestling team, one of the coaches had found out she was related to Jim. As conversation went on, they got to talking about how tough Jim was. The coach said, "Well, yeah, he had to have been damn tough to have survived getting his head run over by a tractor." Jamie called Beck right away and said, "Mom, you never told me that." And while it wasn't true, Jim must have convinced somebody that it was about 20 years before. Cinch would be threatened with 6 months in the hospital or sure death. And Oakley was always being asked if she wanted a drink of toilet water. Pam and Jim were down at Max's branding in 96 or 97. It was a hot, sunny day, and the boys had been on the whiskey. When they came in that night, stumbling and sunburned, Jim called Amy while she was down at Laramie and said, "Pam just doesn't like me anymore. She poured acid on my face." Chad said one time him and Jim were bringing the tail end of the cows through the canyon in a side-by-side, and everybody else had gone through and had been congregating for 2 or 3 hours. He said that they would drive a couple 100 feet and then have to stop and get another drink. Pam must have finally got worried or sick of waiting, came back for him. He said they dang sure covered a lot more country on their way home with Pam. Other than that, Chad refused to tell me any more stories for fear that Pam might reunite them a little prematurely. Jim loved his grandchildren so much. He proudly followed Kimmy and Kaya in their artistic and Kysar in their artistic and sports endeavors, traveling to state to watch Kysar play ball and continuing to watch him from the TV in his final weeks. There was rarely a day that went by that he didn't have Chance running around the house as his little sidekick. He loved his grandkids with everything he had. If somebody was in trouble, Jim was there. If anyone needed help or a recommendation or a leg up when no one else would give them a chance, soft-spoken Jim Kysar was the man to do it. Jim gave us his time. We live in a world of abundance. You can get just about whatever you want, whenever you want it, with free 2-day shipping. And as you grow up and get older, you just learn how scarce time is. If you want to see the fruits of Jim's labor, look around this room. Jim gave it all. He took nothing with him, and we can be forever grateful for the time we shared. He'd never pass up the chance to share a cup of coffee, a cold beer, or a whiskey. Thank you for your time, Jim. And I'd just like to leave you with an original quote from Jimmy Kysar.
Yippee, yappy, yippee, yappy, you! Ow!
My name is Paul Reed, and I wrestled with Jim at the University of Wyoming, and we were very close friends. Spent almost every day together. The way it all started was me and Mr. Zawacki down there were coming over the hill from Cheyenne for the very first time, and we looked down on the University of Wyoming and wondered where all the trees were, because we were back east. And we proceeded on into the town. We knew no one. And it was obvious that we were a little nervous. And we got down there and we didn't know anybody but the coach himself. And we went to a little team meeting. And we met a guy by the name of Jim Kysar. And he was a kind of a talkative guy, but the first thing he started doing was telling us about all of his friends. And when he talks about his friends, they're all good people. They all do good things, and some of them were really smart, and some of them were really talented, and some of them are good looking, and some of them are just people that get things done. And he would go on and on and on about his friends and his family. And he became the adhesive, I thought, and the glue that really kind of held us all together. Because when you met one of Jim's friends, you already knew him because of what Jim had told you about him. And he told them about you. And you immediately put people together. And I thought that was a really cool thing, and I've tried to copycat that sometimes. But he was a really nice man, and he did really good things. His character was good, his work ethics were good. We started a little construction deal. We did odd jobs for a local man down there by the name of Copper Pendatendi that was an old retired carpenter, to make a little money from here and here. But sometimes, as Coach Dowler would say, we managed to dissipate. So we would go out and get some beer, and we would start drinking a little beer, and unusual things would happen. Like we would roll Studebaker cars over in front of the Buckhorn Bar and sit there and wait for the police to come so we could tell them that we didn't know what happened. Jim had quite a bit of strength, so when we come up with one of these unusual ideas, we could usually get it done. And the policeman would come over and say, "Did you boys see that happen?" "Oh yeah, we seen it." He said, "Well, what happened? How fast was he going when he pulled in here?" "Oh, we didn't see anybody pull in. We just seen the car roll over." And he goes, "Well, we got quite a mess here." "Well, we'll help you with it." So we put the battery back in and put some beer in the radiator. And we got the keys back in it. She fired up. The guy that was using it that night was the reason we rolled it over, because he had a date and we thought we'd be funny. And he come out and his car was on its side. And it started up. And they took it home. But those were the kind of things that we did from time to time. And then we had a birthday party, and it was fall in the year, it was late August, early September, and we had a birthday party. And I'm afraid it was mine, and Jim was helping entertain me and some others, but it was the wrestling team, and we had a fall practice where we had to work out every afternoon at the stadium. And we showed up for that practice, but we weren't in very good shape. We had bloodshot eyes. Well, I don't think we smelled very good either. But we got there, and our assistant coach was Ted Adams, who couldn't be here today. He would have been if he could. But he came out and noticed that we had been dissipating again. So he said, Reed and Kysar, you will lead in sprinting up the stadium stairs every aisle. And if anybody passes you two, you will run them again. Well, Jim and I weren't the fastest ones on the team, that's for sure. I mean, we were pretty slow compared to those 134, 136 pounders. And we started up those stadium stairs. And the unusual thing about Jim and his running, he wore bowling shoes. And they were red on one side and black on the other, and they had the size written on the back of them. And I asked him one day, I said, why do you run in bowling shoes? He says, because they make my feet feel good. And I thought, that's a strange reason, but I guess I'll go for it. Anyway, I decided that when Jim took off, I would just make sure I'd watch those bowling shoes so I could make it up all those stadium stairs. So I'm watching these bowling shoes go up and down on the stairs, and we're going along, and we got about the third one, and the 134 pounder come flying around on the bleachers, coming up the bleachers. And I said, Jim, left side. And an arm came out like a railroad crossing. And he hit that guy right in the chest, and he went almost back to the bottom. And I could hear the other fellas behind us saying, don't pass those two guys. They mean business, and I don't think they want to run this thing again. So we got all the way back. We were kind of grinning because we pulled that off. We beat everybody back, and of course, thanks to Jim and I cheating, that's the reason we made it back first. Well, it didn't work. He told us that we all had to run again, and it was Jim and Paul's fault. So we all ran it again, and Jim always had those great one-liners, and he never seemed to be tired, and he never wore out, and our tongues were hanging out, and our hands were on our knees, and we were just dreading the thought of even trying to run those stadium stairs again. And Jim looked at me and he said, I think Teddy's pissed today. And we took off, and we ran it again. Then one evening we were walking our usual normal walk we did once in a while from the Buckhorn Bar to the Cowboy Bar. We liked to walk that, and we'd sing stuff like Locomotion and Redneck Mother and things like that. We walked that quite often. Well, we were walking that one night, and the university had spent some money on the wrestling team, and they took our photographs. You've seen a few of them around on that yellow cardboard, and they had them all on display in a photo shop between our normal walk, between the Buckhorn and the Cowboy Bar. And I believe that Jim had more than a couple of beers, and we were walking by there, and I said, Jimmy, look at that. And a big old display of our pictures were in there. And the next thing I witnessed was, Anima Hawaii! And he tapped on the window, but it shattered. And it broke out, and it went all over the parking lot. And the first thing I checked to see if he cut his arm off. Well, luckily he hadn't. And of course we, again, took off running. And we got out of that one, but barely. Then we did some things that didn't make a lot of sense. When we went to Jim's home, we were telling Joey Kysar, his father, that we were delivering bricks for Powers Brick and Tile down in Laramie. And they came in 500 packs and they weighed 3.8 pounds a piece. And we were delivering them and we were unloading them by hand. And Joey says, well, Jim, bring your truck over to shop. So he built us a set of gin poles so we could lay them down and we could pick up a cube of bricks. And we could deliver these to the local bricklayers, and then we would cut the packs open, and Jim and I would lift 100 brick up on the scaffold. They really liked that because that was before there was forklifts. There was just Jim and Paul's. So we put them up on the scaffold for them, and we had a pretty good business going. And we were celebrating one day because Powers Brick and Tile gave us a little bit of cash for delivering bricks, and Jim said, well, I think we probably ought to spend some of our profits here at Copper's Corner, which was a little bar with a drive-in thing, and it had a big old awning that hung out over the side of it. And Jim pulled in there to order us a 6-pack of Coors beer, but we forgot to put the gin poles down. And the guy slid the window open to see what we wanted, and shingles were dropping on the truck, and boards and all kinds of stuff. And this guy goes, what are you guys doing? And Jim says, well, we just like to get a 6-pack of Coors, if that's all right. Because he never got excited. And then the guy was having a fit and was pretty angry with us, which rightfully so. We just ruined the building. And he was telling us that he was going to have to get estimates, and did we have insurance, and so forth and so on. Jim says, well, that's no problem. We're contractors. So we pulled out of there, and we got some tools out, and we started banging around on it, and we were friends forever after that. Jim had a way of just, people liked him a lot. We had to wrestle round robins at the university, and that's where one man stays out, and 2 other guys would trade off on him. And it was pretty rough because Jim was in my round robin, and Bobby Steele, who sits over here, was in our round robin. And we'd go in those round robins, and it was a rough deal because he would get stitches in his eyebrow, and Jimmy had those mouses over his eyes, and he's had them for a long time, and still does, if you look at the pictures, but that was from getting bruised from wrestling. And I had a cauliflower ear, and they were draining that every night, and it was just a rough situation that we were in, and we'd be in that corner wrestling every night. And the worst part about it was when you had to go in and take down position on Jim, because Jim had these arm bars, and he'd twist your arms around like you were a Barbie doll. And he just kept twisting them around and twisting them around. And Bobby and I had something to say about that. Every time we would have to go in on the bottom, it was like, oh shit. Because you knew this guy was gonna just tear you up. So I don't know what Bobby did about it, but I know I developed the fastest stand-up in the nation. Jim Kysar will never leave my memory. He was a great person. We did a lot of things together, and I'm very proud to say that I know him. Thank you.
Hard act to follow. Let me see if I can get this down here. You might wonder why I'm here. You know, I've known Jim through high school wrestling, actually probably junior high wrestling. But my first memories of him were in high school. And like Paul said, he's a little bit top heavy. He's had a big barrel chest. And I remember weighing in and thinking, wow, whoever's gonna have to wrestle him is gonna be put in a pencil hold. But I never did have to wrestle Jim because he was just a little bit heavier than I was. There wasn't anybody from Lovell that ever even stayed on the mat with him, as far as I remember. Not only that, I got to wrestle with Jim we went on a cultural exchange trip to Japan for a month and a half, whatever it was. Got to know Jim really well there. It was quite a trip for a couple of farm boys. And it was a fun trip. And it was a fun trip because Jim was there. And my memory of Jim was not without Pam. Pam was a cheerleader for the Powell High School for how many years, Pam? All four? All four. That's what I thought. And so that love affair started, like Justin said, in 5th grade. And will go on forever. And then I wrestled for a year after I come back from a mission from my church for University of Wyoming. And Jim was there at that time. Paul was there. He was a assistant coach, right? Yep. When you were after you graduated. And I remember, I think it was him that said, go get me a rock from the W. And I don't know how far that is away, but that was a long trip out there and back. And especially for somebody that was pretty out of shape. And I appreciate Jim and Paul for their support that they gave me at University of Wyoming. Then there was quite a stretch in there where we didn't have much to do with each other. And then my son Spencer met Amy, fell in love with her, and we became family, I guess. And we share 3 grandchildren that we love. Kysar got both of our names. What a load you got, Kysar. I appreciate him. And I appreciate my granddaughters. And Chance, where are you? There you are. You have a wonderful grandpa. Don't ever forget him. I'd like to talk just a little bit about some spiritual things. There's a cross over here. Our Savior was tortured and nailed to that cross for things that he believed in and things that he taught. And he suffered for each of us. You know, he stands at each of our doors. And he even knocks. And all we have to do is open that door and invite him into our lives. And we talk about death, and death reminds us of our own mortality. And when someone dies, we always have questions. Questions like, will we see our loved one again? And yes, we will see our loved ones again. and we will know who they are, and we'll have that relationship that we have with them here. Families are an important part of life and eternity. And Jim was a wonderful family man. We can tell because of the love that he had for those 3 kids that we share. Because of the work ethic that they have. And we ask, is death the end? And it isn't. We live on. And because of the Savior, we will be resurrected and live with our families again. You know, as I was talking with a neighbor of mine, Mike Fink, just after Jim had died, he made a comment to me that I'd like to share with you. He said he'd known Jim for quite a while, and he said, I've never heard Jim say a bad word about anybody. And we can see that by the attendance here today. Jim was a friend. He practiced that golden rule like Justin said. If somebody needed help, he gave them help. If they needed a hand up, he gave them a hand up. Not a bad legacy to have that legacy, to not say a bad word about anybody. I wish I could have that said about me when the time comes. I don't know if I could, because I really cuss the refs in Kysar's game sometimes, so I do say bad words about some people. But anyway, I love Jim. I love Pam and their family. And they have become part of my family. And I think all of you are a part of Jim's family. I don't care if you're related or not, you are a part of his family. And he loved you. And in the program, there's that little deal that says, there are special people in our lives that never leave us, even after they're gone. And it has "Love You, Damn It" over there. Pam has that in her window of her pickup. And I really like that. I'm grateful for the opportunity to know Jim and to give you a few comments and words of the feelings that I had. These sound a lot better when I wake up in the middle of the night and try to figure out what I was trying to say here, and they always come out better by myself. And so I hope I made a little bit of sense. I want you to know that it was a great honor to be a part of Jim's life. The remainder of the program will be in closing. There will be a musical number, "Forever Country," performed by Deb May, Macy Lutt, Miranda Snyder, and Hannah Miller. I'd like to thank all those who have taken a part on the program today. I'd like to thank the family for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this memorial service for Jim. Also, I'd like to mention that Jim's ashes will be placed on the Bighorn Mountains. And following this service, there will be a celebration of Jim's life at the Elks Lodge, and you are all invited. We'll have the musical number now. What's that?
Eagles.
Eagles, excuse me. I have it written down too, Eagles Lodge. Excuse me. All right, the musical number. Oh, and excuse me, there will be a prayer offered after that musical number by Kysar and Bishoff, and we'll go to that. Thank you.
Almost heaven, Bighorn Mountain, Devil's Canyon, Old Shoshone River. Life is older, older than the trees.
Younger than the mountain, blowing like a breeze. Country roads take me home to the place I belong. Wyoming, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country road. If I should stay gathered round, I would only be the rain. So I'll go dark and dusty, but I know painted on I'll figure each step of the way. Teardrop in my eye. Country roads take me home to the place I belong. Wyoming, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads.
On the road again, like a band of gypsies, we go down the highway. We're the best of friends, insisting that the world keep turning our way.
Country roads take me home to the place I belong. Wyoming, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads. I hope life treats you kind, and I hope you have all you dreamed of. I wish you joy and happiness, but above all this, I wish you love. And I will always love you. I Just can't wait to get on the road again.
I needed some sidekicks. Justin and I spoke a little bit last night, and we both mentioned what an honor it was to be asked to be part of today. Even though we are the in-laws and not blood relation, I thought about it last night as I lay down to sleep. Neither was Jim. We all were, instead of in-laws, I like to refer to us as outlaws to this crazy clan. We are the ones who chose to be a part of this family. And after nearly 50 years of marriage into the family, Jim has been around so long, not many know a time before him. He also had to be a longtime member, if not one of the original founders, of the I Hate Being Married to a Bishoff Club. Which I'm pretty sure is set as a term of endearment, right? Anyways, as we move forward with our closing prayers, I would just like to share one of my favorite Bible verses, which comes from Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of thine enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all of the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Dear Lord, I know you have restored the soul of our Uncle Jim, and you were with him in life as well as in death. He is a good man, and he had the simple belief that good people do good things and bad people do bad things. He has walked through the valley of the shadow of death, and I hope he felt your presence, and he feared no evil, for your rod and your staff were there to give him comfort. You have prepared a place for him in your house, and that gives me eternal peace. Lord, please watch over our family, friends, and loved ones as we transition through this time and learn how to move forward. I know you have greater plans for each of us, and sometimes that is difficult to understand, especially when we would like to be selfish and keep Jim here to continue making those memories. Thank you, Lord, for blessing us with his presence and giving us the borrowed time that we had. We are thankful for the memories spent, lessons learned, and most of all, the laughs shared. Thank you for giving Jim one of the best smiles. Many of us are going to treasure that for years to come. Jim was so caring in all that he did and to all people that he came across, even though he was referred to often as Uncle Teaser or Bad Jim to many. Please, Lord, kindly remind us all to help each other out as Jim would have done, and maybe give some teasing along the way. In Jesus' name, amen. Oakley and Cinch, would you please lead us in closing with the Lord's Prayer? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom,
this concludes Jim's service, and we do invite you to come in and socialize and tell stories, share a drink at the Eagles after, immediately. Yep. Thank you.